Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka Mono Bluetron, back again with another episode of 10-Minute Testing. Today we're looking at a deck that I have been begged to take a look at for at least 100 years, and after playing it today, I can finally understand the hype. We're jamming another of this format's misplaced lore-adjacent tribes, this time the most exciting flip effect monsters since Shadal's Krawler. So here's the list, and God, is there a more beautiful sight on Earth than 31 cards you've literally never seen before staring back at you? As always, I'll give you a little bit of background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and as always, the card by card. So firstly, for those of you that don't know, Crawlers are, let me just load up the wiki here, the enemies of the World Chalice. That's weird. I thought the ban list was the enemy of the World Chalice. Anyway, they're a tribe of flip effect monsters that all have a mediocre effect when they're flipped face up, and a completely bonkers effect when they're removed from the field by an opponent's card effect. They summon 2 Crawlers from deck in face-down defense position. Now, that doesn't cover battle, which is of course a little difficult because they're extremely weak, but with their tribal field spell, anytime they lose combat, you can send the opponent's monster to the graveyard alongside them. This forces your opponent into a lose-lose situation. Either they're losing to the constant 1-for-1ing, or they're losing to a massive advantage generation when your monsters are removed from the field. Now, we've thrown together a build I feel pretty good about. Now, this isn't optimal, because Crawlers are such a cheap archetype, we're trying to keep it as inexpensive as possible, but make no mistake, with a couple of expensive format link monsters like Borreload Dragon, this could be a real rogue competitor. This deck's designed to take advantage of a couple of very powerful cards the deck can incidentally play: Wormbait, a card that's been without a home despite being extremely powerful, World Legacy Survival, which will be busted a million different ways on release, and Goes and Match, a stun trap that rewards Xenophobia. With a high degree of consistency boosters, the exciting stun traps available to the archetype, and the explosivity of the link building tools the deck is afforded, we should be able to steal some games with this. So with that, let's get into the card by card. First, we've got the Crawlers. Remember, each Crawler summons 2 Crawlers with different names from your deck when removed from the field by a card effect. We're playing as many different ones as we can as a result. We've got 3 copies of Receptor, which on flip adds a Crawler to your hand, 3 copies of Spine, who destroys a monster, 2 Axon, who destroys a spell or trap, 2 Glia, who specials a Crawler from the graveyard or your hand, 2 Dendrite, who foolishes a guy, and 1 Ranvier, who returns 2 graved Crawlers to your hand. For spells, we've got 3 copies of World Legacy in Darkness, which lets you special summon a Crawler once per turn and win combat, and 3 Terraforming to find it. Next is an extremely powerful card, World Legacy Survival, which excavates the top 5 cards of your deck, adds a Crawler to hand, then bins the remainder. After that is Wormbait, which summons 2 Insect Earth tokens, then 3 Desires and 3 Scapegoat. For traps, we've got 3 copies of World Legacy Communion, which changes an opponent's monster's effect to bounce an opponent's face-up monster, letting your Crawlers trigger and negating a monster's effect. After that is 3 copies of World Legacy Puppet, which lets you flip your set Crawlers on your opponent's turn, and 3 Goes and Match. In the extra, we've got Sky Cavalry, Topologic Bomber, the cheapest format, Decode Talker, Subterra Behemoth Fiendus, 2 Quailark, who is a very useful win condition, followed by 2 Narragos and 1 Cinephas. All of these 3 can be made off the Wormbait tokens, and the latter can be made off of Scapegoats. Now, they've got bad arrows, but they do protect the Crawlers they point to. We're also on the cheap Nightmares, Phoenix and Cerberus, and what would a budget Scapegoat deck be without a Mrs. Radiant and 3 Link Spider? So with that, let's jump into the games. Our first match is up against Predaplant, and one thing our deck routinely fails to do is make very exciting turn 1 boards. Honestly, a couple of Crawlers in defense position is about the best you can hope for, and it's certainly better than any link-related board you're going to put out. We get to go first here, which is excellent. We'll go ahead and start by firing off this Terraforming to find a copy of World Legacy in Darkness, then use its effect to set a copy of Spine, normal summon a Raviner, activate Wormbait, idiotically, because of course the only good turn 1 play is to end on Mrs. Radiant. Our opponent's going to draw into a Predaplant that I don't know the name of, then activate the effect of Orpheus Scorpio to get Darlingtonia Cobra and a refusion to hand. They'll then go into Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, attack over our Mrs. Radiant, and allow us to return it to the top of our deck. Now, because one of our set monsters was special summoned, triggering the effect of this Starving Venom Fusion Dragon will destroy it, so I'll do just that so we can get a couple of Crawlers face down on our side of the board off of its remove from field effect. Afterwards, we're going to activate this copy of Pot of Desires, and we find a couple of really cool link-related tools. This time we'll use Wormbait to go into an X-Crawler and a copy of Link Spider, since this X-Crawler does not mandate Crawler materials. Our opponent draws into an Upstart Goblin. They'll go ahead and fire that off, thank God, because I think the only way they win this game is by putting us to 0. They're going to start by normal summoning a Spinodinea after activating Refusion to get back Starving Venom. They'll attack over our Narragos, but of course it does not care if it is sent by battle or not, so we'll get a bunch of Crawlers to our side of the board. We get to activate the flip effect of Dendrite. They get to activate the effect of their own Predaplant, but of course we get to send it to the graveyard graveyard after combat because of World Legacy and Shadow. And from here on out, we're in total control of the game. We'll go ahead and activate the effect of Spine to destroy their Predaplant, then activate the effect of Raviner to add 2 more cards back to our hand before going into Krawler, using Receptor's effect to get another Krawler, then using World Legacy and Shadow to set 2 cards and attack into the Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. Of course, it is sent, not destroyed, so its effect doesn't get to activate, and our opponent gets to untap with nothing. They start by normal summoning a Predaplant Sarcoplant and going into a copy of Chimera Rafflesia. That's not particularly frightening because in damage step they'll activate the effect, which we will change, of course, to return 1 face-up monster from our side of the board to our hand. That triggers its effect, and we get a couple more Crawlers on our side of the board before they concede. Our second game is up against Paleozoic Lost World Dinosaur, a hilarious deck that actually topped this weekend. We're going second, which is extremely bad news because our opponent has both a Lost World and a Soul Eating Overraptor. They'll use the effect of Overraptor to send a copy of Miscellaneous Source to graveyard, then get an egg to our side of the board, which they can target with Overraptor, then use the Replacement Destruction effect to send a Baby Source to graveyard, and end on a Dolka. Oh, had to be Dolka. We could have beaten Lagia. We're going to go ahead and start by going into a Link Spider, then using Terraforming to get World Legacy and Shadow. That gets Oleanades. Ugh, I really did need that. Then we'll set 4 and pass. Our opponent's going to draw into a Jurak, then normal summon a Giant Rex, use the effect of Lost World. We'll try and chain our set copy of Axon to destroy it, but unfortunately that will get Dolka'd. That means, of course, he'll also be able to Dolka the Grave effect. 2 negations in 1 turn, huh? Really fun card there. Next, they'll go ahead and banish 4 cards from their graveyard for another copy of Overraptor, adding an Ultimate Conductor Tyranno to hand and getting in for a painful amount of damage after summoning another Soul Eating Overraptor off the failed destruction of our egg token. We're still alive, which is something, but unfortunately after this Nightmare Unicorn, all we have to our name is 1 Scapegoat, and we're going to have to beat through a copy of Lagia to do it. We can't stop the summon negation, and they do have a UTC, so it's got to be something Link related. We're going to try and bait it out as best we can. We'll start with a copy of Link Spider, then go into a copy of X-Crawler, go into a Cerberus. That baits out the negation. We'll try and flip our set card, but unfortunately, even though we do have access to another copy of World Legacy and Shadow and can destroy the UTC, we can't really do anything else afterwards. We'll go into a Mrs. Radiant and concede. Well, it's time for Game 3, and you know what that means, a best of 3 versus meta, and with a hand like that, it's gotta be Trickstar. Maybe a Scapegoat can win the game for them. They're going first, which is great news because their hand does nothing. They'll go ahead and set 1 card and pass it back to us. We have a couple copies of Gozen Match, which are classically very good against Scapegoat. They're going to go ahead and Ash Blossom our Terraforming, but with a hand that does nothing else, I would expect there to be at least 1 hand trap in it. They're going to flip up this Scapegoat in end step. That's going to get them a whole bunch of Goat tokens. Hopefully we can send several of them to the graveyard with this copy of Gozen Match. They're first going to go into a copy of Mrs. Radiant, followed by a Nightmare Unicorn. They're going to target our copy of Dendrite. I will flip up a copy of World Legacy Communion, followed by a Gozen Match. They choose Dark, and of course return the Dendrite to hand so we get a couple of set Crawlers as well. They're then going to banish 5 cards from their extra deck for an Eater of Millions, and start banishing my monsters face down after triggering the effect of Receptor to get it back to the hand. So we don't actually have a very clean way to get rid of this Eater of Millions. I incorrectly assume that Communion is activatable in the damage step. It is not. And as a result, we just take 2,200 points of damage here. But thankfully, our opponent can't do anything else because they're locked in on Dark and their hand doesn't do anything anyway. We draw into a copy of Puppets, which is excellent because our set card is Spine. We can go ahead and flip that Spine in battle phase and destroy that copy of Eater of Millions. And since they don't have another one, they have to pass it back to us. Things are looking quite good. We've drawn a copy of Glia. We'll flip that sucker up with World Legacy Puppets, get a copy of Receptor, go into Quillark, then use Communion's Grave effect to set a card to its link point. We're going to attack over the Unicorn and then get in for 600 points of damage. How unbeatable. Our opponent draws into, oh, the bricks, they keep on coming. They'll go into a Cyber Dragon and concede. So for Game 2, we're going second, and unfortunately our opponent has drawn into some of their proactive game plan, so we're actually going to have to play this one out. They're going to start by activating this copy of Pot of Desires, finding another Cyber Dragon, and a Call to the Grave. They'll then activate the effect of Candina to get a Licorice, use Licorice's effect to bounce a Candina, set a couple and pass. I'm smelling a Drollenlock loop, just because there's so many cards in hand that I haven't seen. So I go ahead and set 4, normal summon a Dendrite, then activate this World Legacy Survival. I find kind of a lot of nothing. I'll get another World Legacy Survival just to try and force the issue on the Trickstar reincarnation I know is set. We'll activate this Wormbait that we just set, then go into a copy of Mrs. Radiant so we can at the very least beat over this Licorice, and oh, there's Honest. Nothing feels worse than getting Honested out of the game. We're going to add the Glia that we sent off the Survival back to our hand. They're going to reincarnation, so we draw 3 more cards, one of which is a Communion. I'm pretty happy about that. I'll take 400 more damage so we can get a copy of Shadows to our hand. Then we'll use Shadows to summon our remaining card in our hand hand face down. It is Spine, so maybe we can make something happen. Our opponent's going to activate Light Stage, hitting the Communion. Are you serious? That's the one I wanted. Ugh. Well, they'll go ahead and port into a Licorisica, and unfortunately won't attack, leaving our Scapegoat still dead. We draw into another Gozen match and take 800 damage for it. Well, not ideal, but better than nothing. We're going to go ahead and set it, then flip up this copy of Spine, destroying one of the Licorice, going into a Krawler, then using Communion's Grave effect to set an Axon. I really got to get that copy of the Light Stage off the field. We're going to pass it back to our opponent. They, of course, still have a copy of Candina in hand. They're going to go into a Cyber Dragon, then use Light Stage to target the Gozen match, which I will chain. They'll then normal summon the Candina, get themselves a copy of Reincarnation to hand, then Honest again? Really? I'm going to lose this game from 2 Honests? I get a couple Crawlers to my side of the field, but really it's just too little too late. I just need like maybe 1,000 more life points and I could do this. We're going to take 400 damage followed by 400 more off of the Reincarnation. We tried so hard to keep Reincarnation out, and we can't get rid of the card in our hand because, of course, we'll die to Candina. They'll drag down to the grave, which is not a big problem. After we flip up the Axon, we'll destroy this Cyber Dragon with our copy of Spine, then we'll use Dendrite to send a card to the graveyard before going into Subterra Behemoth Fiendus, beating over the entire board, activating World Legacy, Shadow, and really just dying to the Trickstar Reincarnation in graveyard. For Game 3, we're going to try things just a little bit different. It doesn't pay to play reactive versus Trickstar. They just rack up too much damage too quickly, so we're going to go all the way in on board building. Thankfully, we have just the hand to do it. We're going to fire off this Terraforming for a copy of World Legacy in Shadow, special summon an Axon, normal summon a Spine, go into Krawler, activate Wormbait so we can go into a Neurogus on our side of the board, knowing that if our opponent removes either of these bad boys, we get their effects. Oh, unless they do with Mega Fleet. Huh. Well, it's not the worst thing in the world. We still have a copy of Neurogus on our side of the board, and we wouldn't have gotten both effects anyway because there's just not enough Crawlers in the graveyard. They're going to attack an Axon despite knowing that it has too many defense points to be destroyed, so we get to destroy their field spell before they set 3 and pass it back to us. Now, I know one of those 3 is Scapegoat, which is unfortunate. I'm trying not to get Draw and Lock looped, so I'll go ahead and flip up Spine, destroying the Licorice, then activate Wormbait, going into a Link Spider, a copy of Neurogus, and a copy of Synaptus. That gives us just enough attack to get over this Mega Fleet and get in for a fair amount of damage before ending our turn. And one thing Trickstar just can't deal with is high attack monsters, so they play cards like Scapegoat so they can go into the Nightmares. Unfortunately, our Nightmare is just beginning. They get another copy of Trickstar Light Stage before going into Phoenix, using its effect to destroy our World Legacy and Shadow. And then using Goblin's effect to normal summon again. Boy, it's fair that every deck can do this, huh? They'll special summon a copy of Lilybell from hand after getting it off of the Candina search. We get a couple of Crawlers off of Unicorn's effect, but it's probably not enough, and they start getting in. First for 1,000, adding a Licorice back to their hand. That's unfortunate. Then for 1,000, attacking over our Link Spider. Then for 100, attacking over our Synaptus, who does not have enough targets in graveyard, before tagging out into a Licorice and passing it back to us. So the game is effectively over at this point, despite having a lot of Crawlers in hand and a Spine on our side of the board. We're out of relevant Link material in the extra deck, as well as relevant cards on our side of the board. They're going to reincarnate our hand, and we draw into a Communion, which is something, but of course Communion is always under the constant threat of being hit by the Light Stage. We're going to go into a Neurosis, attack into the Phoenix, set 2 Crawlers, and hope for the best. Our opponent's going to start by wisely using the effect of Trickstar Light Stage to turn off our Communion, normal summoning Candina to get a Licorice, using Licorice's effect to return the Lilybell to hand, specialing the Lilybell, going into a Borolo Dragon, and at this point the game is almost completely over. There's nothing we can do in our deck to destroy Borolo Dragon, just because we don't have access to the same card pool that other format decks do. Our board is entirely clear, and we draw into Raviner, so we concede. So, we're back with the deck. It's alright. I mean, despite losing a lot, this deck is actually kind of a blast. It plays way different than almost any other archetype right now, and I'd honestly recommend it to anyone looking to dip their foot into the format. Though for now, you're going to have to find cards to play over the Cybernetic Horizon releases. You're going to win a lot of games against opponents who refuse to read, and as you get better and can sink more money into it, the first thing you're going to need is a better extra deck suite. Now, it sucks to say, but without Borreload and similarly strong formats, you're really just crippling yourself. The Krawler links are cool, but you've got to be able to win off of a Scapegoat sometimes. Those additions double as being good investments, as almost every deck right now is playing generic links, meaning you've got a sweet upgrade path into viable, expensive meta decks. So that's that. Happy to finally put this one to rest. If you want to see me play the decks I make on this show on stream, I'm on twitch.tv/monobluetron every Tuesday and Thursday from 10 to midnight Eastern Standard Time, and if you have an idea for a deck or archetype you want me to take a look at on this show, let me know in the comments and I'll do my best. Otherwise, I'll see you Wednesday.